Joining us on the WBGO Journal is Steve Adubato, the Emmy Award-winning anchor on State of Affairs, which airs on public broadcasting. He's also the author of Lessons in Leadership, and you hear him right here on WBGO Saturday mornings at 6. He's the host of One-on-One. First of all, thanks for joining us, Steve.
My honor and pleasure. Good to see you, Doug.
Always great to see you. The State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a weekly issue-oriented public policy series that explores the state of affairs on critical issues being addressed in the New Jersey State House. And Steve has really compelling conversations with the state's top government and industry leaders, policy experts, business leaders, educators, and healthcare experts. And coming up this weekend, a 1-hour special on the New Jersey race for governor. Specifically, Steve will be doing a 30-minute interview with Governor Phil Murphy and a separate 30-minute interview with Republican nominee Jack Ciattarelli. Topics will include in-depth policy issues. New Jersey is one of only 2 states in the nation with a gubernatorial race this November. So, Steve, in today's rough political climate, there is such a dramatic dividing line between Republicans and Democrats, arguably more than ever. After speaking with these 2 men and after watching Tuesday night's lively debate at NJPAC, do you feel they are more apart on issues than any race we've seen before in New Jersey?
Well, first of all, it is an honor and pleasure to always be with my friend and colleague, Doug Doyle, and to be with this great audience at WBGO. I want to get that out of the way first. But I got to tell you, these 2 guys, I've interviewed Ciattarelli and Governor Murphy many times. They seem like decent, really good people. But it strikes me, Doug, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox about January 6th and the polarization and the vitriol and the ugliness and the blah, blah, blah. But I will tell you, it was good to see 2 people who disagreed on the issues, were largely respectful to each other. Yes, it was spirited. Yes, the governor said that Ciattarelli disqualified himself. And of course, Ciattarelli had to come back and say, you're disqualified on taxes and on nursing homes, on how the governor dealt with nursing homes, according to Jack Ciattarelli. But compared to the insanity of the way politics is played out in Washington and how family members don't talk to each other and friends don't engage each other because you voted for Trump and I'm not a Democrat and Trump's horrible and back and forth and the vaccine and Biden's not telling me. Do I have friends that don't actually haven't taken the vaccine because Joe Biden is not going to tell them what to do? My point is this: compared to the lunacy going on politically, not just in New Jersey, but around the nation, I'm just glad we have a race where 2 people are engaging on the issues. And when there's an election on November 2nd, there's a good chance someone will win and the other person will recognize that. What an amazing accomplishment, which is absurd in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a good point. As I was sitting in the audience for the debate, which of course the audience was told not to clap and not to respond, but they did. But I think it actually added to the whole program. And
Doug, excuse me for interrupting. It's New Jersey. Don't applaud. The folks listen, we love our friends, John Schreiber and the folks at NJPAC, but the folks at ABC, television, telling people in New Jersey and Newark at the NJPAC not to clap. Okay, sure. Good luck on that one.
So you speak with each candidate during this special for a half hour. What surprised you the most about each of them?
Doug, I was thinking about this afterwards, and my wife asked me, Jennifer asked me, how did you think the interviews went? And I will tell you, and because you're one of the best journalists / interviewers around, you have a standard for what you want to get out of an interview. I do as well. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to get them to be candid and I'm going to get beyond the bullet points and the sound bites and what they say in their 30-second commercials. I don't actually think I accomplished that. And it's not really about me. These 2 guys are so well rehearsed in how they're going to frame not just an issue and their position on an issue, Doug, but how they frame the other person. So if I asked Ciattarelli, tell me about the rally you attended, the Stop the Steal rally, the fact that there were Confederate flags and it was Stop the Steal. And he says, well, didn't know it was that. So he's not being very candid because I can't imagine he didn't know. But then he quickly pivots, right? They call it pivoting, which is really a distraction. Well, look at Governor Murphy, when he's at a rally where they have signs that say defund the police and no justice, no peace. Hold on, I didn't ask you that. I asked about you. And so my point is, they're so focused, and their handlers have helped them and taught them and coached them to pivot, to attack the other person. And I wanted to get past that and try to understand where these guys are on substantive issues. But I don't know how. People will decide for themselves when they watch it. So I don't want to discourage people from doing that. I want them to watch it and listen to it on WBGO. But the truth is, it's pretty canned stuff, Doug.
So with that in mind, do you think people in New Jersey have already made up their minds who they want to vote for?
I'm going to say 90% of the electorate has decided. There's a small number of people who either haven't decided or are not engaged as we speak right now, and frankly aren't that interested. The only chance, in my view, that Jack Ciattarelli has to win this race is that 3/4 plus of those who have not decided decide to go in his favor and against the incumbent. That the issue of taxes in New Jersey, property taxes, income tax, et cetera, that the pandemic and how they view how Governor Murphy has dealt with it, whether you are talking about nursing homes or restrictions on businesses and mask mandates and all the incredibly difficult decisions, including mandated / not so mandated vaccine policies, incredibly difficult leadership and political issues for the governor to deal with. For those who decide that Murphy hasn't done a good enough job or the taxes are too high and they go with, hey, let's try Ciattarelli, what do we have to lose? That's the only way he wins this race, because you know this way better than I do, Doug. This is a blue state. This is a highly urban state, and our suburban voters skew independent to moderate Democrats. This is not Alabama. This is not Texas. This is not a lot of other states that Republicans have a much better chance to win. The Republicans who win for governor are the anomalies, the Chris Christies of the world, the Christie Whitmans of the world. They're anomalies. It's not the norm. The Tom Kaines of the world, that's not the norm. And it's way more Democratic than it was when they won statewide races. And Jack Ciattarelli's fighting that. And the fact that, last point on this, is in a pandemic, one of the scariest things for voters to do is to change leadership. As scary as it is already when dealing with everything we've been dealing with for 18, 19 months as we do this program.
Yeah, you bring up former Governor Chris Christie, former Governor Christie Todd Whitman, and you talk about Tom Kaine, at the time when they were running, very strong, Republican choices. So Governor Murphy trying to become the first Democrat in more than 4 decades to be reelected. The polls say he will. You say, unless some things happen. Is there anything else that you see Jack Ciattarelli needs to do or Governor Murphy doesn't do that would make people doubt that this will happen?
One of the challenges, I think, Ciattarelli has to keep hammering away on taxes, and the nursing home issue. And he's done that. But the other thing that is so interesting to me, Doug, and you and I are sports guys, if people can see this on video, they see what's behind you, a whole bunch of jerseys, and I got my Yankee Derek Jeter stuff. We're in the middle of going to the playoffs. I'll cross my fingers, we'll see. But here's my point. You would ask, what the heck does that have to do with the governor's race? The fact that the governor is a Boston, I'm being serious, the fact that he's a Boston Red Sox fan, and I know that you got Pittsburgh alliances, but you're a Jersey guy now. The fact that Governor Murphy has not been hurt by not being, in quote, a Jersey guy or a Jersey person, that he comes from another part of the country, let's say that from a sports perspective, there's not a lot of love lost between New England and New Jersey for a whole bunch of reasons. Somehow it hasn't hurt him. He doesn't feel New Jersey. He doesn't look New Jersey. He doesn't sound New Jersey. When he does, it doesn't sound right. It just doesn't. But the fact that it hasn't hurt him politically, to me, Jack Ciattarelli can't go around and say, look at me, I'm a Jersey guy. This guy is not from Jersey. So when Murphy said, if taxes are your issue, New Jersey is not the place for you. If Jack Ciattarelli can't break through on that one, with New Jersey having the highest taxes in the nation when it comes to property taxes and a significant income tax, then you can't break through. And unless there are people who are lying to pollsters right now, and 3/4+ of those independent or non-committed voters right now vote for him, I don't see anything changing. For Murphy, the biggest problem I think he has right now is doing or saying something really stupid. and he could. If Ciattarelli gets to him in this debate that our colleagues are having at NJPBS, and Murphy says something really dumb or insensitive or frankly inflammatory, then I don't see anything changing in this race. I just don't. And Murphy is very well practiced, even though he was very intense and spirited at NJPAC. He wasn't out of control. It doesn't look great when you put chapstick on in the middle of a debate, but that's not going to kill you. See, that's the kind of thing. I mean, remember George Bush? I have my watch over here. Remember George Bush looked at his watch in the middle of a debate? George Bush, the father. Look, he looked at his watch. Yeah, he's kind of bored, like a lot of other people. Murphy's putting chapstick on. It's like those kind of things. They don't turn a race around, but it,
gives you something to talk about at least.
It was interesting. Let's leave it at that.
So, what do you feel are each of the candidates' strengths?
Ciattarelli is articulate. He looks good on camera, which sounds incredibly superficial. He presents well. He's well practiced. And frankly, he's seen as someone who has succeeded as a Jersey person, as a business person. He has a CPA background. He's got a successful business. Governor Murphy has succeeded, as I'm repeating myself, coming into New Jersey as an outsider. New Jersey is a very provincial state that you know very well, that he's been accepted by enough Democrats, that he's very wealthy and scared off a lot of other people in the Democratic Party from running for governor, has used the office very well. I'm not even talking about patronage. I'm just talking about has used the incumbency very well, has raised so much money that he's on the air a lot in 30-second spots, has been a reasonable leader during COVID, even if some people disagree. You close my gym, you close my salon, I got to wear the mask. What's up with the kids in schools? He's been a reasonable leader compared to, let's say, an irrational leader like Donald Trump when he was president. So by comparison, Murphy seems reasonable, even though I don't respect and like what the governor did when it came to nursing homes. And more importantly, in the interview, he does not acknowledge, and I asked him several times, do you take responsibility? The answer is no. I disagree with him on that, on leadership. Take responsibility. In retrospect, it was a mistake. He doesn't do it. Overall, I give him a solid B minus on the pandemic, which is the issue of our time. So even though I could nitpick on the nursing home issue, overall, one of his biggest strengths, Doug, is he's seen as a stable leader in an unstable time.
You've really addressed this already, but the two touch points for both of them is that Governor Murphy continues to make a connection with former President Trump and Ciattarelli, and Ciattarelli constantly hits on the taxes. Are those legitimate ties to each candidate?
What's so interesting? I was talking about being candid before. I wish Governor Murphy had just said, you know what? I shouldn't have said, if taxes are your issue, New Jersey is not the state for you. What would be so wrong in saying, you know what? That was really a dumb thing to say. I don't know why I said it, but let me tell you what I really believe. So he won't do that, which, by the way, it is a legitimate issue. Because I think what he meant to say is if taxes winds up being the only issue you care about, and you don't care about childcare, and you don't care about universal health care, and you don't care about protecting people in the pandemic, and you don't care about our kids in Newark and urban schools, that's what he meant to say. So it is a legitimate issue because taxes are so high, and too many people are leaving New Jersey, wealthy New Jerseyans, and living in Florida for one day more than half a year, so we lose all their income tax revenue. Yeah, that's a legitimate issue. Is it a legitimate issue that Jack Ciattarelli said in 2015 that Donald Trump was not qualified to be president for a whole range of reasons, and then, quote, voted for him in 2020 because, quote, he agreed with him on issues? And then after the Stop the Steal insanity and January 6th happens, Jack Ciattarelli doesn't lambaste the former president for wreaking havoc on our nation and trying to wreck our democracy and promoting violence and lunacy in the streets and at the Capitol, and attended that Stop the Steal rally that his face was on the promotion, but he didn't know what it was. How dare you? How dare you wait almost 2 months after the election to say that Joe Biden was the president. How dare you even engage in that? So to me, I've only known Jack Ciattarelli to be a moderate, reasonable Republican. But my perception, Doug, and I'll finish it here, is that his fear of not winning the Republican primary when he thought that he had a challenge moved him so far up Trump's butt. I know I shouldn't say that on public radio, but I got to tell you something. He miscalculated. I don't even think that's what he believes, but he can't figure out how to extricate himself from Donald Trump, who is someone you really do want to extricate yourself from because he's such a dangerous, reckless person and wreaks havoc, not just in the Republican Party, but in our state and nation. Ciattarelli's got a problem, and he can't act like it's not real.
As a media professional for so many years, Steve, there are questions that we can ask on the air, and then there are questions we would like to ask off the air. If you were sitting down to dinner with each of these men, is there a question you would want to ask them that you didn't get a chance to on the show because of just what your role is?
Now, are they together at dinner, Doug, or is it separate? Two separate dinners?
Yeah, I guess we'll go with separate because that's the format that you have.
Go back to Ciattarelli and everything I just said about the whole thing with Trump. I would say, Jack, listen, we've known each other for a long time. You've had a lot of interviews. You're a decent guy who promotes, forget about family values, just human values, being decent and caring for each other, empathetic. Just tell me, why couldn't you just say that Donald Trump lost the election, Joe Biden was the president? Because by not doing that, Jack, you do know that you contributed to the violence and the destruction that happened after that. Jack, come on. You know that, right? And that's a leading question, I know, but I'd love to hear what he had to say. As for Governor Murphy, I think I would ask him this, and again, and it sounds like I'm repeating myself because I did ask them this on the air, but if we were just at dinner and there were no cameras and it wasn't going to be broadcast on public television and other places, Governor, listen, I can't even imagine what you were dealing with during the pandemic, particularly in the early stages, and you had to make quick decisions. But in retrospect, you told me that the nursing home business people, that they told you that they had things under control and they were going to separate people who had COVID or were coming back from the hospital. Governor, shouldn't you have made sure before the decision was made to send 8,000 plus people back who died in those nursing homes? Shouldn't you have made sure that those provisions were in place, or the Department of Health and other state departments that regulate those nursing homes? No, you didn't do what Andrew Cuomo did, which was to try to deceive the public as to how many people died. No, it wasn't that bad, clearly. But if you had a mulligan on this, I hate to use a golf term in such serious, horrible situation, but if you had a mulligan, chance to do it again, wouldn't you have done it differently? I don't know what he'd say, Doug, and I don't know what Ciattarelli would say, but that's what I'd really want to ask them.
We're speaking with Steve Adubato here on the WBGO Journal, and as a former state assemblyman in New Jersey, a Democrat, would you ever want to be a member of the state legislature in today's world?
Doug, that's a hard no. And this is coming from, to put things in perspective, and I hate when people talk about what they were in the past because it sounds like Springsteen, glory days. Nobody really cared, boring stories of glory days, right? I was 25 when I ran for the state legislature. And I was elected at, a ridiculously young age and lost my seat at 27. In my mind, you're asking someone who in his mind was running for Congress literally the next year, because I was a young man in a ridiculous hurry that made no sense. My ego, my ambition, all of it was driving me. And I thought I could change the world. And then I was going to be governor by the time I was, 33, 34, 35. Who knows, right? I never ran for office again. And the further I got away from it, and the closer it got to become what it has become, not only would I not run, which is not encouraging. I know when we need good people to run, and I don't mean me, but I would discourage my sons and our daughter from being engaged in electoral politics. Because when I see members of Congress who got to Congress, the thing I said I wanted to do, not running because they're afraid for their families and their safety, you tell me how that's, quote, worth it. If you don't find another way to make a difference that allows for your safety, but more importantly, your family safety and your peace of mind, to me, which is unfortunate, obviously, because someone has to be in Congress, someone has to be in the legislature, someone has to be a governor or the governor. But I wouldn't do it. I'm too selfish. I don't have the stomach for it, Doug, and I don't have what it takes to do that. I'm not that tough and don't want that life.
With there being such differences and so many things that have happened over the past several years, is at least a positive that maybe voter turnout will be greater in this race than we've seen in the past in New Jersey? And do you think that will be the case?
You know what's interesting? I don't know the number of people who are going to vote because a significant number of people still don't know who Ciattarelli is. And a lot of people are going to vote for Governor Murphy who don't even know who Governor Murphy is. And what I mean by that is they're Democrats. They're going to vote for a Democrat. But this is what's tricky. The conventional answer is supposed to be, yes, the more people vote, the better it is. But here's the problem with that argument. Just remember, in the last presidential election, there was a record number of people who voted, and Donald Trump lost the election with 73.45 million people voting for him. My point is this: more people voted than ever before, and then January 6th happened. And so we want to correlate more people voting with it's better for our representative democracy. Well, it's only better if people can respectfully disagree. It's only better, Doug, if people are not violent in when they protest. It's only better if people can actually engage in civil discourse respectfully and in a spirited fashion without demonizing the other person or wanting to physically, emotionally, psychologically destroy their opponent. It's only better if families and friends can still talk to each other and be together at holidays beyond COVID without wanting to kill each other over politics. So the number of people voting matters, but by itself is not the way you diagnose or predict the health of our representative democracy. That's how I see it. Man, Doug, I want to be more positive, and I'm having a hard time.
It's the way the world is now, Steve.
I know. The problem is with your daughter and our kids, I want to send them a different message about their need to be engaged and involved in the political process, but I want them to be engaged and involved in making society better, and how they choose to do it, frankly, in my view, is healthier and better for them to be outside of the electoral political process, and that's not a good thing.
Who would ever think that COVID wouldn't be, the major issue? But because of the storm, we've had several issues and loss of life in both cases. And then, of course, the racial divide that has happened in this country. There are so many issues. Who would want to be a politician right now? I mean, and then when you talk about at the president level, you're talking about pulling troops out of Afghanistan, it seems like it's a no-win situation for any politician right now. I can't imagine why anybody would want to do what you were just talking about and run for office anymore.
Again, I'm sure to your audience at WBGO, this sounds overly either philosophical or bordering on pretty negative. But here's the catch. And again, I'm not going to open up the Pandora's box of Afghanistan, but when we see the suffering, the pain, the mistakes that were made, and here's what I would say. If politics is everything we're saying it is, and worse, but if President Biden, and I talked about Jack Ciattarelli not being candidate before and Governor Murphy not being candidate before, but here's my view of it. I got to believe that Joe Biden from Delaware, other people call it South Jersey, Delaware, right? It's a big part of, they know us, we know them. If he would have just said, I wish we would have done it better. We should have done it better. I take responsibility for this, but we should have thought through the logistics of this and protecting the people who protected us in Afghanistan. Now, why do I say that? Because here's my obsession, Doug. I have a book that's floating around here. I teach leadership and coach it all the time. And the book is called Extreme Ownership. It's written by 2 former Navy SEALs. You're not a former Navy SEAL. You're always a Navy SEAL, I imagine. I never served. But my point is, if politicians who made mistakes could just say, this is on me, and this is why it's my responsibility, and this is what I learned from it, and this is what I'm going to do moving forward, I don't believe that everyone would be with you, Doug, but it would feel more real as opposed to all this posturing and deflecting and defending and pointing fingers. And so to me, it wouldn't be easier to be in politics, but I believe that more people would be more forgiving, not the hard right and the hard left, but most of us who are somewhere in the middle would go, you know what? I screwed up 10 times today too. I get it. I hear you. You know what? I give you the benefit of the doubt. I know that sounds weird to people, but that's my obsession. Owning it, taking responsibility.
We can't take anything COVID on the lighter side, but how about at least on a positive side as we end this interview? And what has happened during COVID that has made Steve Adubato better?
Wow. Better. So
and that could be as a professional, could be
Yeah.
as a husband, a family man. You take it where you want.
So I'm going to say that to me, sometimes I have a hard time differentiating between my professional and personal life because the mistakes I make as a leader and a broadcaster are the mistakes sometimes I make being a poor listener, being too opinionated, not being open to other points of view. That plays out when you're running a company or you're being a father and a husband. It's the same thing. So I'm going to say this to you. I think I'm a little more empathetic, a little more tolerant and patient, a little more trying to understand when some of my friends who did not get the vaccine, and I just laced into them as to how irresponsible it was. And then one of my closest friends who refused to get the vaccine, Joe Biden's not going to tell me what to do, and then got a serious case of COVID. And I remember wanting to say, you see, and I remember thinking, if I do that, it not only will it hurt our relationship, it doesn't help him. And I remember talking to him every day through it. Now, I'm not trying to make myself out to be anything other than a very flawed Jersey guy. But I remember thinking, he must be suffering right now and feeling like a real ass for what he did or didn't do, which, by the way, he never said he made a mistake by not getting it. I felt like I was a better friend to him because I was trying to understand him more, even though I didn't understand it. And so it's my long-winded way of saying to you, I'm just a little more open and understanding than I was before, just a little bit.
One thing I love about talking to Steve Adubato is he tells you everything right from his soul, right? You get to see what he's all about, and he's the one asking the questions coming up on State of Affairs this weekend as he sits down with Governor Phil Murphy and Republican nominee Jack Ciattarelli for 2 30-minute discussions, one with each candidate. We look forward to that, Steve, and continued success with all you're doing with State of Affairs and one-on-one here on WBGO and all the other activities. You're involved in a lot of charitable organizations as well, and it's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, and let me just get the final word, Doug. You can say all those things about me, but here's the reality. Not everyone does what you do the way you do it. And my point is this. I don't speak as candidly and as openly, and I'm not as vulnerable, particularly after the interview we did about my dad's passing a year ago. You're an incredible listener and an even better person. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks a lot, Steve.